Guys, I'm going to do my best to sound somewhat elegant. I've kind of come across 3 continents in the last 10 days to bring the story around the world. So forgive me if anything doesn't make sense or if you don't hear me as well. My name is Victoria Bousis, and I'm the writer-director of Stay Alive, My Son. I'm going to use this as a piece to kind of show what we're trying to do as a studio and the kind of stories we would like to tell. So I wasn't always a director. I didn't really know what that was. I came from an immigrant Greek family that told me I had to go to school, and that's the path I took. So for me, eventually coming into this medium and learning about technology came from a real deep-seated one to literally change the world. I wanted my life to have meaning. It was inspired very much by the work of my mother. And I fell into this, and my whole life kind of came together when I found this book, Stay Alive, My Son, in Cambodia. It tells the story of a father and how he was forcibly separated from his family, and he was forced to make a decision to abandon his 6-year-old son behind. As I was traveling around the world, and it was sitting with me because it was written so graphically, I kept thinking to myself, how is this possible? How can a parent be forced to make these, horrific decisions? And of course, since that time, our world has somewhat fallen apart. There's been countless stories from Afghanistan to Palestine, Israel, Ukraine, of these decisions being made. And I said to myself, could we somehow use this headset where we can block out the rest of the world, be human once again, be vulnerable with our emotions once again, allow that story to resonate inside of us so that we can not only discover ourselves and our own humanity, but also when we remove the headset, have this willingness to change the narrative. And this is what has inspired me to use this medium to tell these stories differently. So this is a small preview of a trailer for Stay Alive, My Son, for those of you who have not seen it.
I was 33 years old, summer frolics at sea. My family was my greatest strength. We were love. Packed of essentials, we left our home and worked for days until the trucks came to take us to the camps.
Where are we going? I want to go home!
Father who abandoned his own son.
Wear this ring to remember your father, Yathay.
Now lives to endure the evil.
Salvation lies in oneself. All virtue and evil will have their effects in this life or the next. But if you make merry, pray for clarity, and perform good acts, then suffering ends, and you live forever free.
So the challenge for us was we were the first ever to combine game mechanics and cinematics together so you can actually step inside the shoes of this man to actually live a story. We had to come up with a unique pipeline to create this whole narrative. Initially, when you arrive outside of Stay Alive, My Son, you arrive outside of Pin Yathay's home. You ring the doorbell, and a metahuman, the first ever metahuman, customized metahuman ever created, was done by our company of the real man, Pin Yathay. You meet him, he invites you into his home, and then he gives you his prayer beads, asking you to give him peace. He disappears, and then you become him. And you actually physically walk around all the environments that we created inside the Unreal game engine, and you actually first-handedly experience the story. You fall to the ground, and then you go through inside his mental prison, where we use volumetric capture to capture real actors to bring the family to life. They're stylized using Houdini in order for them to feel ghost-like and almost kind of like paint-like. So almost it feels like a romantic element to his, despite their haunting, a romantic element to his family. And as you continue the journey, eventually you're freed from this prison and you fly to this metaphorical heart where you actually find him healed as he has made amends with the past. So this is kind of the new way of kind of living a story in literally another person's shoes. The motivation behind it was a hero's journey. I find that to be the most compelling stories told. It is the most compelling stories told in Hollywood. And my big challenge was that I was going to prove Hollywood wrong. Yes, that indeed a person would stay inside a headset for the duration of a feature film if this story was worthy of their time, was worthy of their vulnerability. So I ended up having this challenge. The project is 55 minutes long. And I have been shocked, bemused, and also thankful that people stay in the headset beyond an hour just to explore the various areas. The journey we took was through the various level design was to take you on this journey. In the terms of world building, when you fall from the real world into this symbolic world, you first fall inside his mental prison, his haunting. So we actually used all the references from S21, which is the actual concentration camps in Cambodia, to bring authenticity to the piece. We made it like a labyrinth because this is what happens in our mind. We keep on playing that tape over and over and over again. And I wanted a way to do something different in VR, which is to externalize what we don't see, the psychological torment, that sense of ambiguous loss and guilt and shame that a lot of these parents actually feel. So you'll see a lot of, this is all hinged in real documentation. Similarly, I wanted to use Angkor Wat Temple, which is the biggest temple in Southeast Asia, where a lot of pilgrims go to seek salvation. And this became the metaphorical place that we fly to, that we actually have him reunite symbolically with his son, and you actually find him healed. And this is SS21, so a lot of that work is using this as a preface to that salvation. Now the next big task was, how do we create the metahuman of Yathay? At that time, the metahuman library was limited to only 687 faces. There was no customization, and so we had to develop a unique pipeline to do that. Because I believe that, you know, this is a real man's story. I have to honor him, and he can't just look like anybody. So we did a very, very long process of over a year to actually get it right. And eventually, when I ask people, what is your favorite part of the story? They say, when I open up that door and I meet him for the first time, it's really, really shocking because I don't feel I'm in that place of the Uncanny Valley. And it took me a minute to kind of deconstruct that because, you know, you're first trying to like create the story and you don't realize kind of what you've done until you've done it. And then I realized, well, every face tells a story. When you look at this man, you see a man who's Asian, you see a man in his 80s, but do you also see that he's a survivor of the Cambodian genocide? Do you also see that he's an engineer, that he's a father that spent the last 45 years looking for his son, writing this book, speaking around the world to try to find him? Do you see a man that was so courageous that he actually spoke at the United Nations tribunal hearings to actually prosecute the people that killed his family and devastated his country? All of those elements were taken into consideration as we actually crafted this metahuman in the way in which he moved, in the sunspots, in the jaggedness of his hands, to give this man this history of who he truly was as a human being. The next challenge was, were we going to create a digital human of his son, Nawat, who was 6 years old when he last saw him? And this for me was really, really challenging because I don't really know if his son is alive. I don't know if he's dead. So I kind of flash forward in a sense of, how about if Yathay was to put on this headset? And how about if this child that looks just like his son, because of the possibility of hyper-realistic metahumans, would that be like totally immoral? Would that be wrong of me to do? And I lean towards that it would be wrong for me to do that. So what we did instead is we tried to do the right thing. So we used the actor in this case, and we brought kind of a similarity between the actor and the real boy to kind of tie that without going all the way and actually recreating his son. This is the small process we took just to kind of put it all together, and I could talk a little bit through it. So this is obviously Pin Yathay, the real man. The face has over 800 bones that cannot be broken during the customization of that mask, 200 of those in the body. We went through a series of texturing using ZBrush to actually sculpt it, and then obviously a lot of texturing to get the sunspots and all the details. The player's hands are also Pin Yathay's hands, so you actually have him as you walk through the experience. We use complex water shaders on the eyes, so you actually feel that the water is pooling around them. We use Marvelous Designer to create cloth simulation for his body. This is the complex rig that we had to use through motion capture data to actually give this man life and movement using both facial and body capture.
I am Yathay Pin. Welcome to my home.
And then we use the same process again for Nawath, et cetera. Making a child in MetaHuman is really complicated. You cannot go below the age of 9. So that had its own pipeline, which I will not get into, but happy to explore with you guys later. So how do we bring the family to life? That was another creative decision because I didn't want to make metahumans out of the family because they are kind of a memory. And I decided instead to use real actors to breathe life into these characters. We did use volumetric capture. At that time, this is Depth Kit, December 2019. And then we had to figure out how to use the Houdini pipeline to actually create them. This is the small process we did to make that happen. So it's in a green screen with single depth cameras. You can tell here using various masks. And then we had to use Houdini because there was no plugin for Unreal at the time to create this kind of ghostly effect, but you can actually walk through them. And it gave it a fantastical element. Here are the two elements side by side. So the player actually triggers the memories.
Hi, Papa. 1, 2, 3, Coco!
So when I first started this project, I was determined to find the boy, right? We put his saliva on 23andMe. I still receive updates, and I'm always running to my phone, and it's always like, the fourth or the fifth, person in line. And somehow in my heart and in my soul, I do believe is alive, and so does Yathay. But instead of just thinking about finding Nawath, what we saw through the course of taking this project around the world is that there's millions of families currently displaced who know where their children are, but can't reach them because there's legal roadblocks and policies there that prevent the reunification of families. And I thought to myself, if we brought one of those children home to their parents, wouldn't it be like bringing back Nawath to his father? Because at the end of the day, this is what Thay wanted to do. Thay wanted people to change because of his story, and he didn't want the past to be repeated in our future. So today, our world is under siege. There's over 109 million displaced families around the world, and that is not from the latest data of Palestine. 50% of those displaced people are actually women and girls, and they are obviously the ones that are most vulnerable to sex trafficking, abuse, and neglect. And there is this shame that a lot of displaced families feel, this idea of shame, because they don't have a state, they don't have a home, they don't have a right, and people look at them and treat them less of. So our mission beyond just bringing families together was this idea to bring back human dignity to displaced people. And this whole notion started evolving as this project started going around the world. And there is a real power to be seen, right? I saw Yathay for what he was. I saw his humanity. When we see the humanity in these displaced people, I feel that that's where the door opens and we can actually create social change. So how can we do that? We're doing this global campaign called Seen. And I've heard a lot of the rhetoric, and I'm sure you've heard it too, and maybe also you may also believe it. They should fight for their own country and stay home and rebuild their country. Well, a lot of these are women and children and elderly. They really can't fight. You hear that they've come here to take our jobs. Most jobs taken by a lot of displaced families and immigrants and migrants are probably jobs that most people do not take. They might be exaggerating their flight in order to get sympathy. If you've gone through the asylum process and you've seen a lot of the horrid elements that have taken place because of that process, I don't think anyone would subject themselves to that if they really didn't have to. So our challenge was, okay, we have this wonderful heart and we have this amazing mission. Now, how do we attack it, right, to actually make change? We knew that we had to go to the policy leaders. We had to go knock on their doors and make them see again, because the laws do not reflect what the people need. So we started with our collaboration with the United Nations. We were at the World Economic Forum in New York recently, literally putting and schlepping suitcases with VR headsets around and putting people in headsets. And I will tell you, the moment that they experienced the story, it was a game changer. They started speaking about the law differently. They started speaking about the process differently. And I felt that they started feeling a bit ashamed that they were not actually doing more. And we're still continuing to do that. We're going to Geneva in December for the Global Refugee Forum, because there's where all member states will pledge to reunify families for the first time in 5 years. Right now, there's no horizon. I have files on my desk of parents looking for their kids for over 10 years. So that's the top-down approach. But I believe everybody has a voice. People in this room have a voice. There is a bottom-up approach as well. So we've gone, in the last year, we've gone to over 21 countries building these communities. People keep sharing the project through word of mouth about the power of it. We've created these interesting NFTs which allow you to take a part of our momentum and our movement. It's little things like, finding out more information about displaced families, doing little things. It's not financially driven at all. It's more through action and compassion. And eventually, the next goal is for us to actually expand this reach to museums using LED walls so that we can actually put 300 people in a room to actually watch this. Because at the end of the day, for me, I believe that being seen, once people are seen, is when humanity really flourishes. So thank you very much. If you'd like to know more information about our project, please feel free to scan the QR code. I also have little leaflets for you, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Victoria. Lovely. We have time, people.
I was
Any
going
questions?
really fast, by the way. I was like, that clock was like giving me all stress. It was like, it was moving really, really quickly there. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, I feel the same. No, we have
lots of time.
We have lots of time.
We have lots of time.
We can write a book. Let's write my memoir. It's going to be short. So any questions, any feedback? This is a lovely, whoa, here we go. That's it.
Oh, cool. I love questions.
First of all, congratulations for that project. I think it's a perfect example of VR being the empathy machine, like the reaction of the politicians when they experience it themselves. I would like to know, both producer-wise and director-wise, how did you navigate through all those little problems in production, in like volumetric capture? How did you budget for that on the one hand, and on the other hand, didn't lose your vision during all that technical process?
I may have lost my mind a few times. I kind of wanted to check the computer over the balcony a few more times than that. I think it's very hard. I think it's very hard to be a producer and a director at the same time. I had to do it because no one in my team, I built a team in Greece, and we had people from the Ukraine, Egypt, Germany, helping us when the war first broke out for Chapter 1. Now most of my team is actually Greek. But it was very difficult navigating it because we had to stay on that budget, and you also have to be kind of like, time is money, and this was a self-funded project, so that was very difficult. But I think if you really have a vision to do something, the people that I worked on this project, all the way from my actors, Elodie Young was in Marvel's Daredevil, G.I. Joe Retaliation. Arnold was just in Bullet Train with Brad Pitt. I couldn't pay their salaries. But I sat there and I said, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. I'm figuring things out as well. And we just kept moving with that momentum. And I think the inspiration is what kept the team going. My producing skills helped me kind of create the schedule. So we did sprints a lot. So everyone knew the goal in the beginning of the week, what the goal was, and we try to stick to a schedule. Figuring the technology out, that was trial and error. But I got to tell you, if people really believe in what you're going to do, my team is just fearless. They just found everything, they uncovered everything, and they made it happen. So I think it's driven by vision, it's driven by will, and it's driven to do something really special, honestly. Yeah.
Any other questions? Remarks? Yes.
Hi. First of all, thanks for the great presentation. I really enjoyed it. I would like to know if you would, during the volumetric capturing process, which, as you said, you know, it can be quite difficult to have a very refined, you know, representation. Did you actually feel that it was more conducive to your creativity to have some sort of, you know, limitations, or did you, was it more limiting or actually freeing? Is what I want to ask, I guess.
Yeah, I think it depends. So when I first started to do it, right, VolCap had just emerged. DepthKit was the poor man's version of volumetric capture. The kind of quotes I was getting for the proper rig, you know, like the full nice cameras, that whole thing was $5,000 a minute. And I mean, that was just not going to happen, you know. So as I said, this is the limitation we have. But hold on a second, this is a memory. Memories are imperfect. Memories have this feeling of basically, they're imperfect, right? So the question then became of how do we stylize them so we actually lean into the limitation we had both financially and technically at the time. And that ended up being an actual like gift later on, because I think we would have disserviced the piece if we would have done it a different way. The hard part was getting the Houdini to work, because DepthKit speaks to unity. So we had these gigantic Olympic caches with a lot of artifacting that were like 30 gigabytes of cache. And I was like, oh my God, this piece is going to be like, it was breaking everybody's computers. And it just wasn't right. So we really had to spend about 3 months going through Houdini to create the stylized version of it, so that it's triggered and it feels very ghostly, but also very beautiful as well at the same time. So that's what ended up happening, and it was actually a pleasant surprise that we had DepthKit in 2019. So yeah.
Yes.
Hi, wonderful presentation and story. I had a question because you mentioned that you can't basically motion capture a child under 9 years. In film, you can, with the permission of a parent, you know, film a child. Can you maybe elaborate more on that law?
So let me just clarify. So you can motion capture a person at any age, you know. Oh, I shouldn't say any age. I shouldn't say a baby. I've never done that yet. But you can't make a metahuman, because a child's proportions are very different from an adult. Like an adult has, I believe it's 7 or 8 heads. A child has a bigger head and smaller limbs. So you can only go up to a certain age in metahumans. So we had to actually customize a body for it and make sure that the motion capture data was able to read onto the new skeleton we created. So that's what that was. In terms of rights, this is a discussion I had at Stereopsia. There's a lot of new law right now coming in terms of our digital identity, because it is your digital identity at the end. We actually have cloned Ty's voice as well. He reads a paragraph off his book and you can skin his voice. So the EU is very, very advanced in protecting the digital identity of people. They actually implemented law this September to honor that. The United States does not have formal digital identity law. What it does go under is the right of privacy, which is a more generalized law. In my situation, I did ask Ty for his rights to use his digital self for the piece, because I just think it's the right thing to do. But I think you're going to see a lot more law emerging as things get a little creepier in the world. I think there's also going to be a lot of misuse of deep fakes, hyper-realistic metahumans, clonings that can actually kind of create uprise and other very strange things. But I think the need is never more than now to actually have law to protect digital identity, and also AI, the use of AI with that. So I went a little bit further than to close the loop on that, but yeah.
Okie dokie. Any other questions, remarks? If not, might I add something to the table as well? Yeah. It's so interesting to the fact that we talk about empathy. Well, my line of research is within live performance in virtual environments. I've been doing that for the past few years when it was not hyped. And we kind of talk about empathy as a big buzzword.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that you mentioned compassion.
Yeah.
I've came up with this framework a few years ago, which is this idea that when you're creating immersive storytelling that emotionally resonates with others, that is only but the first stage of it, which is like generating this kind of empathic connection. If you want to move and trigger to some sort of action, that's where you go into some sort of compassion.
Yeah.
And then when you go into specifically into the native medium, what I like to call emotional geography, which is this combination of plausibility, place, and body, because of the embodiment factor. Of course, you talked about Chris Milk and the idea of empathy.
Yeah.
So content is always king.
Yeah,
By the end of the day,
yeah.
Then you get to wrap content around this kind of experimental approach that you did so well. And what fascinates me about your work is, first of all, your emotional involvement as an artist, and the fact that you are using it to, trigger a kind of a wider impact and effect on communities that resonate directly with this kind of story. Did you thought about this conceptually when you were doing the creative process? I mean, thinking about empathy and the impact, or were you just, using the word for the sake of the newsletter?
No, I think honestly, I think it's just who I am, and I was being told that, like, you're going to make the story about this Cambodian man that and you've met in this book. That's not commercial, and I got a lot of that kind of feedback. Forget about the fact that it's too long, this is too big of a project, you're never going to make it at that level. And I just said to myself that the first project that I'm going to do is going to be who I am. I will make the next one, it'll be commercial, I'll do a nice, franchisable, story. It will still have meaning, because I'm always of the meaning. But the first one that I was going to do was going to be who I am, and I was very, very stuck. And this is why I decided to put myself on the line, to fund it, to do it my way, and not have people tell me kind of how to navigate that creative journey. And in terms of Chris Milk, I've always had this kind of argument with that. I'm always like, what does empathy mean? Empathy just means like, oh, I feel so bad for you. Oh, that's horrible. Right? That's what it is, right?
It's kind of a lifestyle.
It's not like, oh, come into my house, let me help you. That's just saying it's like a pity party. No one wants a pity party. So I said, compassion is true, true impact. So it's been remarkable. People are, the more they see it, the more they want to see it, the more they tell their friends about it. It's still a pain because the graphics are really, really high, and that was a choice that I made because I'm like, I want to make a piece that's going to stand the test of time, because it's going to take a minute to get out there. So we're hoping to publish it next year. We need to figure that out because it doesn't really fit in Meta. It's not really a Steam thing. So
we're talking about that the other day. That's a
we're kind of creating our own version, because I think people don't seek content that. Why can't we be in the shoes of a hero and experience a journey? Why does it have to be a game or a single shooter? That could be fun too, but why can't movies evolve to become something like this? And this is why we won the PGA award, and this is where Hollywood finally said, oh, this could be interesting, because they didn't call it a game. So we'll see.
We'll see. So I would say the idea is, go beyond being empathic with the other, with the victimized other, as a kind of a global citizenship of kind of a lifestyle of sorts, like people go 1 month to Africa and they put on Instagram. I'm not saying that isn't good and legit, it is, but what kind of long-term effects does that have?
Right.
And you put yourself in someone else's shoes, but you try not to steal those shoes, then you give them back, and you resonate after that.
It gets scary in some parts. Because of the spatialized sound, and you're in there for a while. When you're in that concentration camp and you're hearing like the firing of guns, and you're literally walking on bones and the bones are cracking, people stop. They can't walk past it. It takes you dark, so you go up, because that's the story. That's what happened, and you can't sugarcoat it. But I think people really learn a lot. A lot of people didn't know this happened in history. A lot of people didn't really know a lot about Cambodia in general. But once you get out, you're like, and you see the footage of the real man, and you're like, wow, that just blew my mind. It still blows my mind, the strength of the human spirit. So I think people like that are the kind of people that we need now, to remind us that we are strong, to remind us that we're also good, and to remind us also that we can also change the world one person at a time. So I think that's all
Amen
I have to say.
that.
Thank you.
Okie dokie. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you so much, my dear.